They found her at dawn, kneeling beside something that didn't belong in her hands. Malachi Crow reined in on the rise and took the scene in the way a rancher reads weather, quietly, warily, counting what could turn. 12 men in a ragged crescent, a dead sorrel with 2 neat holes in its ribs, and in the center, a woman in doeskin, palms cupped around a carved stone veined with sunlight and gold dust. Ayana, someone muttered, like a curse and a dare at once. The crowd had the smell of a mine shift gone bad. Sweat, whiskey, and rumor. Vernon Briggs sat tall on a glossy bay, cuffs white as salt. Gun hung low like a promise. "She knows where Williams hid it," he barked. "That stone's the Whispering Creek map." Malachi noted what the pack had missed. Ayana's clothes were torn from brush, not from a fight. Her eyes were wide but steady. Blood smeared the stone, not her hands. The gold dust, God help her, would damn any native in a country where law bent toward whoever could pay for it. "Step away, Crow," Vernon said, voice easy, gun already clearing leather. "This ain't your quarrel." "She's on my land," Malachi lied, swinging down. The lie tasted like iron. His ranch hardly covered taxes and dust, but he'd learned long ago that when the rich announce the rules, a poor man only survives by writing one of his own. Ayana looked up at him, breath ghosting in the cold. "They shot my horse," she whispered. "Then they circled back for me." Malachi shifted so his shadow fell across her. The stone in her hands flashed. Rivers, ridge lines, a lattice of marks too careful to be guesswork. "Her people forfeited claims when they signed," Vernon snapped. "Stone's ours." "It belongs to whoever's buried where it points," Malachi said, loudly enough for the waverers to hear. "Even hard men carry private superstitions. And out here, you don't spit at graves." Vernon's pistol cracked, a warning that kicked dust at Malachi's boots. "Last chance." From the eastern ridge, a dark seam of dust lifted. Riders, fast. Malachi heard it before the others did, the low thunder of decisions arriving. Ayana rose, voice clear as creek water. "This stone doesn't lead to gold. It marks our dead." The words rolled the crowd back a step. Several rifles sank a hair. Vernon's smile didn't budge. "Map's a map, and I say, hand it over." Ayana leaned toward Malachi, barely moving her lips. "Those riders are my people. If they find me with you, they'll think you helped take me." So that was the shape of it, damned by one side, misread by the other. Malachi's heart knocked. He could stay and argue with men who'd already chosen the ending, or leave and become exactly what they'd call him. "There's a canyon," Ayana whispered, 2 miles north, hidden mouth behind fallen rock. Vernon swung into his saddle. His men followed, eyes cutting to the coming riders. No one wanted to be the fool standing between grief and the men who carried it. "This isn't over, Crow," he shouted. "Civilized hands'll hold that stone." Malachi hauled Ayana onto his horse and kicked for the north draw. Sage slapped his chaps. The bay found a second wind. The world narrowed to hooves and breath and the hot press of risk. They slid through a slit in broken limestone and spilled into a pocket valley, walled in cottonwood and shadow. Water riffled. Birds stitched the air. An outlaw's cradle, if he'd ever seen one. "How'd you know this place?" he asked, tying the reins to a willow root. "My grandmother's refuge," Ayana said, sinking to the log. She laid the stone across her knees. Up close, the map was heartbreak and precision. Little spirals for burial mounds, tiny pips for cedar markers, a lattice of trails that led nowhere, any prospector would want to dig. "Whispering Creek?" Malachi asked. "Sacred long before you called it that," she said. "A man named Williams found one of our graves. He was punished by our law. Vernon wants to turn that into war." The canyon held its breath. Hoofbeats scraped rock at the hidden mouth. Ayana stepped to the seam of light. "Takakota," she called softly. "Brother, I'm here." A man's answer came back, tight and urgent. Ayana's face shadowed. "Vernon spread word you kidnapped me. There's a bounty. $50, dead or alive." Malachi tasted the number like a bullet. 50 would make strangers greedy and neighbors brave. 3 figures squeezed through, Ayana's brother and 2 young warriors. Hands drifted to weapons. Malachi kept his rifle low, palms open. Words snapped between siblings like dry kindling. Finally, Ayana turned. "He thinks it's too late. Settlers ride at dawn. Soldiers, too. They plan to take our village and call it justice." Her eyes found his. "Takakota says you can speak for your people." Malachi looked at the stone, at the cut of the canyon, at the long road his life had taken to arrive at this fork. Yesterday, he'd been a hungry rancher. This morning, he'd stepped between a mob and a woman. Tonight, he was being asked to keep 2 nations from bleeding. "Tell your council," he said, voice steadier than his hands. "I'll come. I'll say what's true." Outside, the light thinned to copper. Inside, the choice hardened to steel. Tomorrow would not wait. The village was alive with whispers when Malachi entered. Shadows flickered across painted lodges, and a circle of elders sat around a fire that crackled like judgment itself. Every eye followed him. Pale skin, dust-worn clothes, a stranger carrying the weight of suspicion. Ayana walked at his side, the sacred stone wrapped in a deerskin pouch pressed tight against her chest. Takakota trailed behind, his jaw clenched, one hand never far from the knife at his hip. To them, Malachi was both shield and threat, rescuer and possible spy. Chief Mucun rose, weathered as cottonwood bark, but standing tall in his years. His gaze swept Malachi like a blade. "You risked yourself for my daughter, but risk and trust are not the same. Why should we believe you when your people have broken every promise made to ours?" The fire popped, sending sparks into the night sky. Malachi felt every face pressing against him, demanding an answer. His throat was dry, but he forced the words out. "Because Vernon Briggs is lying. He doesn't want justice. He wants gold that doesn't exist. And he'll use Williams's death to make war sound righteous. I can't speak for all settlers, but I can tell you the truth. Men like Briggs will destroy anyone, white or native, if it makes them richer. If you fight tomorrow, you're fighting the wrong enemy." Murmurs rippled through the circle. Some elders nodded, others frowned, their eyes hard with memory of broken treaties and burned villages. An older woman rose, her silver hair gleaming in the firelight. She spoke sharply, her voice cutting the air like a whip. Ayana translated quietly. "She says your kind always arrive with smooth words. You say justice, but mean conquest. Why should this night be different?" Malachi thought of his ruined ranch, of debt collectors who would never ride this far, of his sister buried too young because no one dared to stand up when it mattered. "Because I've lost too," he said softly. "I know what it is to watch greed take everything. If I walk away, Vernon wins. If I stay, maybe, just maybe, we stop him." The council fell into tense debate. Voices rose and fell. some urging to prepare for battle, others warning of slaughter if they met rifles with arrows and hunting guns. Malachi caught fragments through Ayana's hurried whispers, fear of soldiers, anger at false accusations, dread of what dawn might bring. Finally, Chief Mucun lifted his hand. Silence returned. He looked at Malachi, then at the stone Ayana cradled. At sunrise, they expect us to fight or surrender. We will do neither. We will show them truth, and truth will be stronger than bullets. Malachi frowned. What do you mean? The chief's eyes glinted in the firelight. You will see. But know this. If you stand with us tomorrow, you stand with us as kin, not as guest. There will be no turning back. Ayana's hand brushed his arm, steadying him. For the first time, Malachi saw not only fear in her gaze, but hope. Fragile, daring, almost reckless hope. The fire cracked again, sealing the unspoken pact. Whatever plan the chief carried into dawn, Malachi had just become part of it. Morning came sharp and cold. Mist clung to the valley floor as if the earth itself tried to hide what was about to happen. Malachi stood with Ayana near the edge of the village, his rifle slung across his shoulder, his stomach knotted tight. He'd faced droughts, debts, and hungry winters, but never a wall of men bent on blood. From the tree line, dust rose with the rhythm of hooves. Vernon Briggs appeared at the head of 40 armed settlers, his fine clothes spotless, his horse well-fed, his smile a predator's grin. Behind him, farmers and drifters carried rifles and shotguns, their faces twisted with fear disguised as anger. Captain James Morton and 6 uniformed soldiers rode among them, trying to bring order. The captain's eyes betrayed unease. He wasn't leading this army so much as being dragged behind it. "Send her out!" Vernon's voice cracked across the clearing. "Send the girl and the stone, or we burn your village to the ground." Ayana stiffened. The pouch under her arm seemed to grow heavier with every heartbeat. Malachi glanced at her, then at the chief, who stood tall and unarmed in the open. Chief Mucun's calmness unsettled him most of all. The tribe did not form battle lines. Instead, men, women, and even children stepped into the open circle of the village. They arranged benches and a wooden platform, not barricades. They lit fires not for war, but for counsel. It was a scene of deliberate defiance, the opposite of what Vernon expected. Captain Morton raised his hand. "Hold your fire! Let's hear them out!" But Vernon sneered, raising his rifle. "This is trickery! They're stalling!" He pointed toward Malachi. "And there's your proof. The white traitor who stole what belongs to us. You'll hang beside her, Crow." Malachi felt every eye on him. He forced himself forward, his boots crunching on frost-hardened ground. "I stole nothing," he said, his voice steady, though his chest burned. "I stopped you from murdering an innocent woman. That stone doesn't lead to gold. It marks the graves of her people. You'd desecrate the dead for profit, Vernon. That's your justice." The settlers shifted uneasily. Superstition weighed heavy in gold country, and even the greediest of men feared disturbing the dead. Vernon's support wavered for the first time. Chief Mucun lifted his voice, deep and commanding. "You accuse us of murder. You accuse us of theft. Today we will give you the truth instead, the truth of Williams's death, the truth of what gold really lies in this valley." He signaled, and elders emerged from the lodges carrying wooden chests and cloth bundles. The crowd fell into hushed confusion. Malachi's breath caught. He had no idea what the chief was about to reveal, but he knew it was dangerous. Vernon snarled, furious at losing control. Don't listen. They'll trick you with false words and trinkets. The only justice here is fire and rope." Malachi raised his rifle, not at Vernon, but high into the air. He fired a single shot. The echo rolled across the valley like thunder, cutting through the chaos. All heads turned toward him. "Enough," Malachi shouted. "If you want truth, then listen. If you want blood, then know it will stain this land forever. Choose now which you'll stand for." The settlers hesitated. The soldiers tightened their grips, but did not fire. And in that fragile silence, Chief Mucun stepped onto the platform, prepared to turn accusation into revelation. The air in the valley turned so still that every breath felt louder than a shout. Chief Mucun stood on the platform, the firelight painting his weathered face with shadows. He raised his arms, not in surrender, but in command of the moment. "You want justice for Williams," the chief said in clear English. "You want proof of what truly happened. Today, you will have it." From the trees, two elders stepped forward carrying a wrapped bundle. When they opened it, the crowd gasped. Inside lay Williams's silver pocket watch, his worn leather journal, and his mining tools. Items that no thief would abandon unless they had no reason to keep them. Joseph Crow Feather, a wiry elder with a scout's posture, stepped beside the chief. His voice was calm, but carried to every ear. "I was there the night Williams died. I saw who killed him. It was not our people. It was Samuel Garrett, a prospector who owed Williams more money than he could ever repay." A ripple of murmurs surged through the settlers. Garrett had a reputation for cards, drink, and debts. Suddenly, the story of a drunken quarrel sounded more believable than a tribal conspiracy. "That's a lie," Vernon barked, his face turning red. But his words no longer landed with the same weight. Doubt had cracked his authority. Joseph continued, holding up Williams's journal. "We buried him properly, by your own customs, because he once showed our people respect. We kept his belongings safe, waiting for a time when truth would matter more than vengeance. That time is now." Captain Morton dismounted, taking the watch and journal in his hands. He flipped through the pages, his frown deepening with each line. "This handwriting matches records we have on file," he said quietly. "These are genuine." The settlers stirred, their anger giving way to uncertainty. Many lowered their rifles, but Chief Mucun wasn't finished. He signaled again, and the wooden chests were opened. Inside glittered raw gold ore, richer than anything pulled from local streams. Gasps broke out among the mob as the morning sun struck the stones, sending golden light across the clearing. "For generations, we have known the locations of these deposits," Mucun said. "We never mined them, because gold holds no sacred value to us. But we know what it means to you. Today, we offer partnership. Share in this wealth, and in return, give us what we ask: protection of our lands, recognition of our rights, and peace between our peoples." The settlers froze, torn between greed and suspicion. Malachi could see it in their eyes. The same men who had been ready to kill were now calculating profits. Vernon's voice tried to cut through their silence. "It's a trick. They dangle gold so you forget they murdered a white man." But Joseph Crow Feather's words sliced clean through the lie. "If you doubt us, follow. We can take you to Garrett himself. He's been hiding in the abandoned mine shaft since the killing. He'll confess when confronted with the truth." For the first time, Vernon looked unsettled. His bluster faltered as men turned questioning eyes on him. Captain Morton straightened, his hand resting on his sword. "This ends here. Chief Mucun has offered proof and peace. We'll find Garrett, and settle this matter with law, not mobs. Malachi felt the tension ease, but only slightly. He knew Vernon Briggs wasn't beaten yet. A man like that would strike again if given the chance. Ayana moved closer, her voice steady but soft enough for only Malachi to hear. This is only the beginning. If you stay with us, you'll be standing between two worlds, and both will test you. He nodded slowly, his rifle still in hand. The day wasn't won, but the path forward had been revealed. Truth had broken through bloodlust, and for the first time since this nightmare began, dawn brought something more than fear. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the valley as Captain Morton assembled a small party to investigate Joseph Crow Feather's claim. Malachi joined, uneasy but resolute, while Ayana and Takakota insisted on accompanying them. Vernon Briggs, bound and fuming, spat curses as soldiers shoved him toward his horse. The abandoned mine shaft lay less than a mile from the creek. The entrance gaped like a wound in the hillside, timbers rotting, air thick with the smell of damp earth and old death. Malachi's grip tightened on his rifle as they approached. Every instinct screamed of danger. Joseph moved ahead with surprising speed for his age. He's inside, too afraid to come out, too desperate to face town. That fear will make him talk. Two soldiers entered first, lanterns cutting through the darkness. Shouts echoed moments later, followed by the sound of scuffling boots. They dragged a gaunt man into the daylight. Samuel Garrett, his eyes wild, his clothes filthy, and his hands shaking as though the weight of guilt had finally crushed him. "Williams," he muttered, voice breaking. "He wouldn't stop hounding me. Said he'd tell the whole town I was a cheat." Garrett's gaze darted to the pocket watch in Morton's hand. His knees buckled. "I didn't mean to kill him. Just wanted him quiet. One shot, that's all." But it was enough. The confession spread like fire through the assembled men. Some settlers cursed, realizing they'd been duped into blaming the tribe. Others looked at Vernon Briggs with suspicion, as if pieces of his scheme were falling into place. Morton's voice rang out clear and sharp. "By your own admission, Samuel Garrett, you are guilty of the murder of Dutch Williams. You'll stand trial under territorial law." Garrett sobbed, his fight gone. Soldiers bound his wrists, but the real eyes of judgment fell on Vernon. Chief Mucun stepped forward, his tone calm but cutting. "You wanted blood from my people for a crime committed by your own. You stirred hatred, spread lies, and sought war." Vernon tried to snarl, but the crowd no longer listened. His allies' rifles sagged. Gold glimmered in their minds now, heavier than any loyalty to him. Morton gestured, and soldiers dragged Vernon down from his horse. "Vernon Briggs, you are under arrest for inciting violence and attempting to frame innocent people." Malachi exhaled, but relief came cautiously. He knew too well that justice on the frontier was fragile. One spark could reignite the powder keg. As the crowd dispersed, Captain Morton turned to Malachi. "You risked everything to shield this woman, when others would have sold her out. That choice may have saved us from bloodshed today." Ayana's hand brushed Malachi's arm, steady and warm. "You stood when no one else would. My people will not forget this." For the first time in days, Malachi allowed himself to believe survival was possible. But as the wind shifted and dust carried the scent of gold through the valley, he knew survival was only the beginning. What came next? Treaties, profits, betrayal, would test them all far more than one outlaw with a guilty conscience. The valley was restless. Word of Garrett's confession had already spread through the gathered settlers, but suspicion lingered like smoke after a fire. Justice for one murder wasn't enough to mend years of distrust, nor did it erase the lure of gold that gleamed in every man's imagination. Chief Mucun understood this. That afternoon, he summoned everyone, soldiers, settlers, and tribal elders, to the center of the village. Women arranged benches of rough-hewn logs, while warriors stood watch at the perimeter. Malachi sat uneasily near the council fire, Ayana at his side, Takakota standing like a sentinel behind them. When Mucun rose, silence fell. His voice carried across the clearing, deep and deliberate. You came seeking vengeance. You wanted blood. But blood cannot feed your families, nor build a future. We offer you something else. At his signal, elders opened the wooden chests they had brought earlier. Inside lay gold ore so pure it caught the light like fire. A murmur rippled through the settlers. Malachi felt the energy shift, anger giving way to hunger. Captain Morton stepped closer, studying the samples. These deposits are richer than any we've surveyed. If this is true, it could change the territory's fortunes. It is true, Joseph Crowfeather said, his voice steady. Our people have known of these veins for generations. We left them untouched, for they are not sacred to us. But we understand what they mean to you. We offer partnership, not war. Vernon Briggs, bound and seething nearby, spat into the dirt. You'll regret trusting them. Savages don't keep deals. No one listened. His power was gone, washed away by the promise of legitimate wealth. Mucun turned to Malachi, his eyes sharp. But partnership requires trust, and trust requires a bridge. This man, he gestured toward Malachi, risked his life for my daughter when he had nothing to gain. He has seen both sides of this land. He will serve as the voice between our peoples. The announcement stunned Malachi. He shifted uncomfortably under so many stares. Chief, I'm no politician. I'm a rancher barely holding on to my land. You are more than that, Ayana said softly. You are proof that justice still lives in this territory. That is why it must be you. Morton considered this, then nodded slowly. The governor will want a liaison if this partnership is to succeed. Mr. Crow has already proven himself a man of integrity. I'll carry this proposal to Santa Fe myself. The settlers murmured, some reluctantly, some with cautious approval. The lure of gold outweighed their doubts. For once, Malachi wasn't being dismissed as a poor rancher. He was being seen as something else, a man with a voice that mattered. As the meeting ended, Ayana pressed the carved stone into his hands. This was never about gold, she said quietly. It was always about memory, about protecting what cannot be replaced. Keep it safe. You may need it again. Malachi felt the weight of the stone, heavier than any rifle he had carried. He had stepped into a role he never sought, but destiny had no patience for hesitation. The treaty of gold and blood was being written before his eyes, and he was now part of its ink. The streets of Santa Fe were swollen with onlookers when the prisoners arrived. Vernon Briggs, the once untouchable land baron, and Samuel Garrett, the trembling prospector, were marched in chains through the plaza toward the courthouse. Soldiers flanked them, rifles gleaming under the desert sun. Malachi rode at the side of Captain Morton, Ayana and Takakota just behind. He felt every eye on him. A year ago, he'd been a nameless rancher in debt. Now he was the man who had exposed lies, delivered killers, and carried with him the beginnings of a tuari that could reshape the territory. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled of ink and sweat. Governor Robert Washington himself presided, seated at the front with judges and clerks. He was a man of strict posture, his words clipped and heavy with authority. The first witness called was Joseph Crow Feather. His testimony was calm and exact, recounting how he had seen Garrett kill Williams after a poker dispute. The courtroom stirred when Williams' belongings, the silver watch, the journal, the tools, were presented as evidence. Garrett broke down before the testimony even finished. His voice cracked as he confessed to the murder, sobbing that he never meant for it to spiral into war. The judges wrote quickly, their pens scratching like locust wings. The verdict was clear: guilty of murder, to be hanged at sunrise. But Vernon Briggs was not so easily cornered. His lawyers argued he was a victim of misunderstanding, that he had acted in the interest of settlers' safety. Yet when Captain Morton produced the arrest warrant, and Malachi himself testified about Vernon's lies, the tide turned. Ayana stepped forward next. Her presence silenced the room. Dressed in traditional dress, but speaking flawless English, she recounted how Vernon's men had tried to kill her horse, strand her in the wilderness, and spread lies about her people. "This was never about justice," she said, her voice unwavering. "It was about greed." The final blow came from documents uncovered in Vernon's strongbox, letters to landowners promising gold shares in exchange for supporting violence against the tribe. His allies, once loyal, now turned their faces away in shame. The judges declared him guilty of inciting violence, fraud, and conspiracy against both settlers and native people. His sentence was less final than Garrett's: 5 years in territorial prison and permanent banishment from the valley. But the humiliation was worse. When the gavel fell, a new current swept the room. It was more than a trial. It was a reckoning. For the first time, the voices of native witnesses had carried the same weight as settlers. For the first time, truth had been stronger than wealth. Outside the courthouse, as the sun dipped low, Governor Washington called Malachi aside. "You've stepped into a dangerous place, nephew," he said, "but also a necessary one. The territory needs men who can speak for both sides." Malachi looked at Ayana, standing proudly beside her brother. The carved stone map hung at her side like a heartbeat. "Then let's make sure today is not just another story swallowed by the desert," he said. The governor's gaze softened, but his words were iron. "Then be ready. Trials end, but treachery always finds new routes. We will need you again." The gallows in Santa Fe stood stark against the morning sky. By dawn, a crowd had gathered to witness Samuel Garrett's hanging. His trembling frame climbed the steps, eyes hollow with despair. Malachi stood among the onlookers, the noose casting its long shadow across the wooden platform. When the trapdoor fell and Garrett's body swung lifeless, the crowd murmured, some satisfied, some unsettled. Justice had been served for the death of Dutch Williams, but Malachi knew the trial had been about more than one man. It had been about proving that lies could be stripped bare, even when spoken by the powerful. Later that afternoon, the territorial hall filled again, this time not with anger, but with the cautious hope of negotiation. Governor Washington presided over the assembly, flanked by judges, clerks, and officers. Across from them sat Chief Mucun, Ayana, Takakota, and Joseph Crow Feather, their presence commanding quiet respect. Malachi, positioned between the two delegations, felt the weight of his new role pressing on his shoulders. He was neither entirely settler nor entirely tribal, but something in between, a bridge. The governor rose first. "These lands have seen enough blood. The gold beneath our feet is valuable, yes, but the lives of those who walk upon it are more valuable still. Today we decide if we build a future together, or burn it in pursuit of greed. Chief Mucun stood in reply, his weathered hands steady. My people ask for no riches, only fairness. The burial sites must remain untouched. Our villages must remain secure. If the settlers wish to share the earth's gold, then let them also share its burdens and its responsibilities. Ayana translated for those who needed it, her voice carrying with a clarity that made the room lean in to listen. When she spoke of the sacred stone map, she held it high, not as treasure, but as proof of heritage. This is not gold, she said firmly. This is memory. This is honor. If you want our partnership, you must respect both. Malachi stepped forward when the debate grew tense. His voice was rough from sleepless nights, but steady. I was a rancher no one cared about. Now I stand here because I chose to protect what was right. If I can risk everything for justice, so can all of you. This treaty is not just about gold. It's about deciding what kind of men we want to be remembered as. The silence that followed stretched like a bowstring. Then Governor Washington nodded once. Let it be written, he said to the clerks. A treaty of shared mining rights, with protection for tribal lands and fair distribution of profits. The hall erupted, not in cheers, but in the low murmur of relief. For the first time, two worlds that had been forced apart by greed began to stitch together something new. When it was done, Malachi stepped outside into the desert sun. Ayana joined him, the sacred stone still clutched protectively in her hand. Her dark eyes reflected both weariness and determination. You've tied your fate to ours, she said quietly. And I wouldn't change it, Malachi replied. A man can lose land, cattle, and gold, but if he loses his soul, he has nothing left. Ayana's lips curved into the faintest smile. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. The storm of treachery had passed. Ahead lay a harder road, but one that at least offered hope. Together, they walked back into the hall, where signatures waited, ink and paper sealing what blood and betrayal could not. A new dawn had risen over the territory.